Hey Crossroads, Pastor Luke here. Thanks for joining us again for Defining Moments. My guest today is Lisa Cour. Lisa, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Sure. Yes, my name is Lisa Cour. I have been attending Crossroads with my family for about 12 years. My family consists of my husband and my 3 children, and whatever other children happen to be kicking around at the time, that changes time to time.
Now, a lot of parents say something like that, and they mean like someone who happens to be hanging out. But that's not always true for you. Are we going to talk about that more later, or you want to just give you like a little explanation on that?
The quick explanation is we are foster parents. So we have been therapeutic foster parents, which generally, it means a lot of things. Mostly in the day-to-day, what it means is that they tend to stay with us for long periods of time. So anywhere from a year to 3 years. So we've cycled through some kids, but now we've been doing it long enough. What we're finding is when the kids leave, there's another generation that's coming up too. So now we're into the babies and toddlers of the kids who have lived with us. So.
Okay, and I've had the privilege to know several of the kids who have been there. The last church I was at, your house at the time was pretty close. And in fact, I was on a softball team with your husband and both your brother-in-laws. I was definitely the worst player on the team. Like, there's no doubt I was definitely the worst, but I had a ton of fun doing it.
Yeah, well, that was the main goal of it.
Good.
So.
Good. Okay, so we're here to talk about a significant, not necessarily the most significant, but a moment that has definitely left a mark on you. So would you tell us about what your defining moment is?
So when you first asked me, the immediate significant defining moment that jumped out to me is what I'll talk about in a minute. But as the more and more I was thinking about it, the more I thought, gosh, my life is littered with defining moments. I think that's not unique to me. I think that we all kind of experience that. And honestly, probably every day I have a defining moment. And a lot of that just is how sinful I am and getting up and choosing today.
That's good.
Today I'm going to honor my husband and show the fruits of the Spirit to my children and reach out to a neighbor. So sure. I before I dive into my defining moment that I've chosen for today, I don't want to underestimate the importance of the daily defining moments, because I think in a lifetime, those daily decisions and moments where you're at just a little crossroads can add up to
that's really
to significance.
That's really good. How about after this we do daily decisions? We'll do a daily series.
Decisions.
Come on for like 5 minutes. We'll give a daily decision every day. Yeah. That's really good.
But if whoever knows me, there would be no argument probably that my most significant moment was my cancer journey. So in 2014, when I was 39 years old, so now everybody knows how old I am.
No one's doing math. This is not a math show.
Not a problem. After cancer and facing the real chance of death, you're actually celebrating extra years. They're all extra now, so I'm happy to have more birthdays and be getting older. So a little shift in perspective there. Anyway, so in 2014, I was diagnosed with colorectal cancer, and that started. So now we have BC, before cancer, and after. Okay. There's definitely an unmistakable mark in time for how life was before and how it was after. So,
it's funny. I remember we were both at the soccer field. I think our kids were playing different soccer games, but we were back to back. And you were on the phone the whole time, which for many parents is like, so what? But you are always very engaged, very not a phone person at all. And I was like, wow, she's on the phone for a really, and I'm trying not to be too nosy, but I'm like, I don't think that's not normal. I noticed, I'm not right away, but I noticed after a while, like, that's not typical.
That's interesting.
And that was, I think, the weekend before news went public, but it was coming up very close to everything going public.
Yeah. So it was a Wednesday I had the testing. Friday was the call from the doctor. So then that whole weekend was like, just telling family. And it's not like you can just call them and be like, hey, how's it going? And it just comes up in conversation. You just kind of have to drop it like a heavy rock. And so, two things from that whole weekend was the shift where, the doctor called me and said, let's make, here's your appointments. Now, it was during soccer season, so my 3 little kids were involved in everything, and the doctor's just telling me when all these appointments are happening, not what's convenient for me, what works for me. And I thought, okay, life is going to be different. That was my first indication, and then that whole weekend was just calling family and letting them know. So,
wow. So it's funny. I have a friend who he had Hodgkin's lymphoma, and he called his mom. He said, "Don't freak out. I have cancer," which of course she then freaked out. He was like, in retrospect, but how do you know how to begin that conversation?
It doesn't come up.
Like like you said, did rock and just go, I'm gonna drop this.
Yeah.
So you said you had 3 kids. How old are the kids at this point, roughly?
Yeah, they're 4, 6, and 8.
Okay.
And then we had an 18-year-old foster son. So.
Okay, so the doctor has now given you this just litany of appointments. So how does that period of multiple appointments go for you?
Just a whirlwind. I think everybody would probably describe it similarly. You're just in a world that you hopefully are not familiar with, using terms you're not familiar with, and just kind of figuring out all of the pieces to that. So just lots of appointments, lots of waiting, lots of phone calls. Just kind of figuring out the best course of action to take. And we actually went through a couple different doctors to determine the one we were going to, and got our.
And so, in short, for you, the course of action was chemo.
So there's. Yeah, I ended up doing all the things.
Okay.
Yeah,
all of
the things. So, for whatever reason, some I'm kind of piecing together, and some I'll never know. I kind of just hit every roadblock that there was to hit. So, I just took the hard way for every time. So
in a really interesting way. So eventually you do end up back home in a recovery time, right? I think it was during recovery, but I'm not sure. This YouTube show is now a part of Crossroads Online Campus, which really began right as I came to Crossroads, and you were at least at a place where you couldn't come to church.
Yep.
I don't know exactly where in the journey you were, but you weren't able to come to church. And my wife happened to point out that, like, well, what do we do at Crossroads? This new church to us, there's all kind for online. I go, well, we don't do anything.
Yep.
I go to Pastor John and say, okay, we've got to do something. There are people like Lisa, and I assume there must be others, but you were actually the only person who I ever mentioned, because you were the only concrete. And so we've got to figure out something. We've got to make some kind of an online thing happen. So I started by buying this like $100 piece of hardware that plugged into a laptop, had no idea what we were doing, how to make, and eventually we were hosting on our website. At one point there was a password behind, I don't know if you were there yet, but there was like a password, and production values were low, audio was in and out. But anyway, all that is to say that somehow we ended up here at this place, and I'll be honest, we were more ready for COVID than we would have been if we hadn't started that process. Also, the building of the campus, which didn't open, we were more ready to make the shift because of things like that we thought were for something else that ended up being used in different ways, like this, which I think is probably similar to cancer. Not that it's like, oh, it's so good that happened, but on the other side, you're able to use it. So could you maybe come up with some ideas or remember some ways that the cancer experience is redeemed, I would say? Not that it was like, oh, I'm so glad this happened, but something that kind of came out of it.
Yes. Well, first of all, I want to talk about that YouTube because that was top secret. So, like, we did not want word to get out that you could look at church online. And I want you to know, nobody heard it from me.
I believe it.
That link did not get out because I sent it to anybody. So, just wanted to clear that up.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
But yeah, absolutely. God redeems. And I can't sit here and tell you that I totally understand it all and that it's all just been wrapped up with in a pretty package, tied up with a bow. But absolutely, he redeems so much. There's so many, there's so many gifts that have come out of it. A lot of that is the work that's been done in me. That honestly, I didn't even know it needed to be done, but the again, the before and after is just there's a lot of beautiful things. I have been able to step into other people's cancer journeys, and I'll tell you honestly, I used to be one of those people that I don't even know what to say. I'll probably say the wrong thing, so I'm going to go the route of saying nothing,
Okay.
And maybe even just avoiding them. So that was my response before, and now it's just such a comfortable thing for me to step into that. It's comfortable for me to look them in the eye and talk about death and the pain and the experiences, and I just think that's a gift, right. and that only came because of the years that we went through things.
When you are doing that, when you're having that conversation, as I hate to say it, but the experienced veteran to the newbie,
yeah,
do they seem to respond well to that? Is that a helpful? I mean, is it like here's someone I can talk to?
I think it's like anything that you've. So, for instance, you mentioned softball before. You and I can't talk. I can't talk knowledgeably about softball. I there's a whole nother story for my softball experience, but. Knowing that somebody gets it, I joked with my husband at one point, but it's a little bit true to a certain extent that there's very few people that have more street cred than I do with the cancer. If they have more, then they're probably not around. So having somebody who understands it and can they understand it, I think is helpful to be able to talk about things and like I know that you understand this because I know that you walked it. So
wow, that's really good. You said something. I'll probably say the wrong thing. I usually say to people like you probably won't say the wrong thing. It's not. However, one thing you never say is I know how you feel when you don't.
Right.
But being able to say no, I really do know how you feel is a very valuable thing.
Yeah. That being said, it's I always have to be careful because. This is everybody's unique journey to walk through, whether it's cancer or anything else. So I always try to be careful to let them do some of the discovering on their own too, because God has different things to show them.
Interesting. Wow. So is there anything that you would, and I know that we're not in a personal conversation with someone who might be there, but is there any kind of just maybe vague or big concepts you would give to someone who's finding themselves right now, even just facing? I imagine there's that time, it's probably the worst when you get the first test and you're waiting for the result, don't yet know what it is, and then your mind is going to go to the worst. Your mind is going to go to the absolute, this. Well, what kind of input might you give to someone in that scenario?
So this, I'm only going to say this because it's just completely true. I don't want it to come off as super Christian or something, which I'm afraid that it might. But when I first found out, the very first thing I did was do a Google search. So, of course, that's exactly what they tell you to not do. And it took me about 3 minutes to realize why they tell you to not do that. And so I just remember shutting my laptop and saying, if I have time to read and do this Google searching, I'm actually going to apply that time to my Bible and figure out what's in there, because what I'm going to find on Google, I already know before I've even stepped too far into this journey, that's not going to be strong enough to hold me up for what's about to happen. And that's what I did. I didn't do another Google search. I didn't read about it. My husband went deep into the woods with all the research and all that. But I just, and I tried to find a verse before here, because there was, I thought, well, yeah, there was, I'll just find a great verse. And my Bible's just marked up with so many different dates and stuff of unique things that God was showing me at that unique time. So I couldn't even pull one that was like, yeah, this was my verse for these 2 years that we went through this. And so that just points back to how the Bible says it's alive and active, and it really is. And when you're putting the time in to study and read, God's going to bring those things back to your remembrance when you need them. And it has a whole different meaning than the time you read it 2 years ago.
Right.
And that happens constantly.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's so true. I got to say, I would be that Google guy. I would not be able to resist, which probably most people aren't. Yep. And I'm also not sure I'd be able to be like, you know what, never mind, let me close this laptop. I think I might spend a while.
Well, maybe if you'd read what I
That's true. I might.
So yeah, it's a gift that I'm here for sure. So
wow. So then, when did you begin to feel like you had turned the corner, or out of the woods, or do you feel maybe you don't feel that way even still?
Well, I get tested regularly, and my doctors continue to be pleased with what they're finding. So it's never going to be a done, like, check it off the list, but. Yeah, it definitely took some time, but it was probably 3 years before it was feeling like, okay, we're good, we're doing life again. So,
wow. I mean, we only went through half of that in quarantine and lockdown, and to do the whole thing over again, it's not quite the same. But that's probably my closest analog to understanding.
It was actually a lot of similarities when quarantine and COVID started. One of my initial responses was, wow, people are going to be able to learn a lot of the things that I learned going through cancer without going through cancer. And so we won't spend the time here, but there were a lot of parallels wow. that I noticed. So, hey, if you could pull some of those lessons just from COVID that everybody had to do anyway, then
that's really interesting.
Yeah, there's some good stuff in there.
Do you feel like it helped you navigate your family through quarantine? I don't want to say better, but at least having more familiarity with the process?
Well, I have tweens and teens now, so there's nothing easy about maneuvering my family through things. But for sure, they know what hard is. We've done that before, so I think we were all very familiar with you gotta stay in the house because there's dangerous germs out there. So that part we definitely understood. Wow. So
yeah, I'll bet. Okay, so as we wrap this up. I kind of started to touch on this, but any kind of final comments or final thoughts? Any advice you would give to someone who is in your same shoes again? We kind of already touched on, but any just last ideas or last things you want to communicate?
Yeah, I would say it's a lot of trusting God, a lot of just choosing to believe that what he says about himself is true, and just trusting that he's sovereign and he's in control. I think we all learned that in 2020, right? We're not in control. Right. And so leaning into the fact that he's sovereign, he's in control, and he's so good and kind. Those are...
In the process of learning that, did you find that it kind of was up and down, that you had days that were, okay, I'm really feeling good, I'm feeling pretty trusting, God's in control, and days where
Yeah, absolutely. And my understanding definitely, some days I was like, this is great. And so many days I was like, this is so hard. And like I said at the beginning, I did all the roadblocks, and just at every turn, there was an easy way, there was a hard way. Me and my body took the hard way every time. So that got defeating, and just, you think that I'm trusting God, I'm doing this, and why are we doing it the hard way every time? And I don't have answers to all of that even still, but I know that he can be trusted, and he's good and kind, and he brings it all back around to use it for our good. And I've seen that played out in my heart and in my life, and in the ways that I've been able to walk with other people too.
That is, I mean, it's so real. I've been in situations where I had to really try to trust God, and I remember growing up in church, and people are like, trusting God, and I always felt like it was like this light switch kind of thing. Like, okay, trusting in God, not trusting in God. And that if you somehow were struggling in trusting, if you were having ups and downs, it was like, oh, well, you're not doing it. You have failed to trust. And I think only with personal experience to realize, like, no, it's up and it's down, and you're trying to stay up, and you're trying to learn how to be up more than down, but there's no foolproof way to say, like, oh, from now on you will never have a struggle or a temptation to.
Well, that goes back to our, at the beginning, talking about the dailiness of it. And, you don't decide to trust this morning, go to bed, and tomorrow it's carried over. At least that's not for me. It's a daily decision to, despite what's going around, and, pick your hard. We're all doing it. Not everybody's had cancer, but
right.
Gosh, life is hard. And so despite what that hard is, to say, today I choose to trust. Today I don't necessarily understand, but I'm going to obey and put my trust in God, because I love that verse in John that says, where else would we go? Like, what else is there?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, Lisa, I know that I speak for many of us that we are so glad to have you here. It was an interesting journey, even for people who are in the periphery, but we were praying, and we believe God still has a plan. He still has purposes, and seeing your family taking part in that every time. Our church is made all the richer for having you guys as part of the community. Yeah. So yeah, we're thrilled to have you.
That's that goes back to COVID also. I think we've all learned that. Hopefully we've learned that just the gift that community is. The church just surrounded us immediately. We had food on our doorstep, just so many things. I know that the weight of the journey was lifted from me in large part by the prayers, and so there's a difficult side to community, but the beauty of it and the gift of it is so worth it. We need each other. We need to reach out and have community.
I couldn't say it better. And so I'm going to close this up in prayer.
Okay.
Lord Jesus, thank you for this day. God, thank you for the blessing of community, of being in your house, of being online amongst each other, amongst fellow believers. God, I pray that you would be with Lisa and the entire family, God, that you would bless them and use them. God, I pray that you would continue to help them draw closer to you. God, I pray that your spirit would fill their home. God, that they would know your peace and your protection. God, that they would know the joy of being with you. God, I pray your blessing on each and everything they do. God, I pray that you would be with every person who watches this video, wherever they are, whatever life circumstances they find themselves in. I pray that they would know that you are good and that you are trustworthy. And Jesus, we ask it in your name. Amen.
Amen.
God bless you, Crossroads. We look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.